Binti ini di rumah lem bambu dulu berfatih asal kita lo bambu dulu fatih. Aling ke sungka balaba.
Onulobe, it's been a while, and today, this time, I'd like to start off by shattering a myth. It's cashew season, and cashew apples are delicious. They're more bitter than a lot of other tropical fruit, but they're very much in the same vein as other tropical fruits you would expect to eat, such as mangoes or passion fruit. They're not as sour as passion fruit, and they're not as sweet as mangoes, but whoever made up the idea that they're not good eating clearly has not had one. The texture is kind of interesting. It's juicy, but it's also tough. You can see it's like I had to tug at it. That I can see as a frustration for people, but if that's really a frustration, get over yourself. Oh, they're really nice and juicy. Really nice and juicy. Cashew apples are great, and it also has me curious as to what happens to the cashew apples in a lot of places. There is such a cashew industry in the United States. Cashews are sold in bulk, but you never see cashew apples, and it's, I know at least in part because of this myth that the cashew apple is bad, but that makes me really curious as to know what happens to all the cashew apples. Are they thrown out? Or are they eaten by farmers? I don't know. In any case, though, happy to eat some cashew apples. Anyway, as for an update to what I've been doing lately, I've been mostly focusing on the Community Needs Assessment Survey. That's an important step in the Peace Corps process. What it is exactly what it sounds like. I'm going from compound to compound and person to person, talking about my village and what its needs are, what its concerns are, what are people doing, what aren't people doing. And it's interesting because it's basically just social research. It is exactly the kind of thing that we covered in class. Research methods and analysis and data analysis, which just goes to show how applicable it is and honestly how much UNCG should get more data analysis and research methods classes. I had absolutely no idea that I would be going from Center for Housing and Community Studies to doing the same thing, similar techniques in Peace Corps. I don't think I would have called that a year ago. Unfortunately, there apparently isn't enough of a market for advanced social research classes, which is a really disappointing thing because I'm getting the distinct impression the longer I live that those are some of the most useful and marketable skills that sociology majors get. Regarding my experiences with the Community Needs Assessment Survey, I had the names of every compound that I knew existed in my village, and by using the names, I could figure out what the tribal demographics were. I could figure out how many compounds were Jola, how many were Mandinka, how many were Wolof, how many were Pular, and I even learned about a new tribe that I hadn't heard of before, Corninkas, and also Manjago. Can't forget the Manjagos. Anyway, using that, I was able to get percentiles of tribal demographics in my village, and from there I knew the proportions that I should interview in order to keep my sample representative. And furthermore, I also did the same thing based on location with 4 separate locations. I know it would have been a lot easier to do a random sample and possibly better, but I didn't think about that until after I did the math. And now for the fun biology fact of the 2 weeks, I drink bleach every day. Yeah, I've been drinking bleach every day for 5 months straight. More details on why? It's because that's what we use to disinfect water. You see, in Peace Corps, we're all given a nice shiny water filter. That's able to get the big stuff, which, as I understand it, is eukaryotic organisms, larger parasites, but the filters are not small enough to get bacteria. To kill the bacteria, we have bleach droppers. Simple enough, whenever you want to drink some water, 2 drops of bleach for every 1.5 liters. From there, you then fill up the water, and I normally put in the bleach first and then fill up the water because that, I'm told, mixes it around faster, but in any case, I then follow the CDC's recommendation, leave it for 30 minutes after bleaching it in order to let it diffuse and kill the bacteria. When I first came to the Gambia, when I first learned that we were going to be doing this, I was completely shocked at the fact that we were putting bleach in our water. It's not an idea that I had ever come across as a disinfection method, at least not for disinfecting food and food products. It has always been something that I've thought of as a big no-no. But that said, the more research I've done into it, the more I found it's a pretty widely used method for disinfecting water. It doesn't seem to be the best out there, but it's definitely a good one, and one that comes recommended by the EPA, the CDC, and Washington Department of Health. And the Washington Department of Health even puts the second tier after boiling water as a methods of disinfection. So yeah, bleach water, definitely better than dying of dysentery. That said, in the interest of being fair to the situation here, while this is something that Peace Corps recommends us doing, this is also something that a lot of Gambians do not do. I don't think I've seen a single Gambian doing much of anything to purify the water, and there are a lot of people who drink straight out of the taps. This has ended up leading to something of a debate between Peace Corps volunteers over whether or not using a filter is actually worth it at all. As somebody who had to get fed through IV drip earlier this year, I think the answer is pretty clear which is better. But we're not in cholera country. The more dangerous stuff does not seem to be the norm here, and I don't know if that's a behavior that I'd have any chance of being able to change or influence in any way, just because waiting 30 minutes to drink your liter of water is not convenient. That said, it's something I'm going to be doing. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite parts of Gambian culture, give a little introduction to it, because it's something that I honestly don't know nearly as much as I want to about, but that said, I know enough to give a basic introduction to it, and that is joking relationships. Now, joking relationships are something incredibly unique. We don't have joke mates in America, at least not the way Gambians do. You see, in West African history, as well as pretty much history universally across the world, there have been conflicts, some of which worse than others, some of which bloodier than others. In the Gambia, different families had a unique way of getting past this, and that is joking relationships. When two families had conflict, when there was war or something deeply painful between the two of them, they would then convene and then become permanently joke mates. And as joke mates, they are allowed to make fun of each other without it being offensive. If your joke mate insults you, you know it is just a joke. It is not meant to be taken seriously, and from everything that I have seen, it is not taken seriously. This joking relationship ends up bleeding to a lot of Gambian culture, and people will say really silly things, really silly insults to one another as a joke. And I'm all about that. Make jokes, not war. Something else that's interesting about the jokes, though, is that the jokes tend to follow certain flavors, and a lot of the same jokes get repeated. The one that's the most common, at least amongst Jolas, is for someone to call them their child. For example, my brother Sambo and he calls me Anyolo, I call him Ginyolo. It's us joking in the same way joke mates would. This is also a pretty common one. The Jolas are joke mates with the Fulas and the Serers. And the joke is always that the Jolas are the fathers, uncles, mothers, aunts, what have you. That said, it's kind of funny, the reverse of it, though I've only heard this joke made once, is that the Jolas are the slaves of the Fulas. And part of the reason for that discrepancy is because the Fulas traditionally had a caste system, whereas the Jolas were actually the only tribe in the Gambia that did not have a caste system, and for that reason did not have a slave caste. So they would make the joke, oh, my child. I get the impression a lot of other joke mates, even outside of Jolas, make the my child joke, and this is admittedly speculation, but I think that could be because of people wanting to move away from the old caste system culture. I don't get as much talk about it because I'm immersed in Jola culture. If the caste systems of other tribes has any effect on the people of my village, I have not seen it. That said, there have been people who I've talked to who have been affected by it. The Serers, for example, one of the most deeply traditional tribes in the Gambia, and they are still intensely affected by it. My nurse, while I was in the hospital, was a Serer. He was extremely anti-caste system. He really hated it. But he also himself knew slaves that legitimately thought they were lesser people because they were born slaves. Worth noting here that slave does not mean slave in the way we think of it. As I understand it, the modern slaves in the caste systems of the Gambia is just the word they use for laborers. They're people who, at this point, are allowed to do work outside of manual labor, but that said, it's somewhat shameful if they do, and ends up being something that's more based in social pressure. Whether or not there is any kind of ownership of the slave, I don't know. Back to joke mates, one of the other ones that's a common one is you eat too much. I don't know what else to say about that one. That one does seem to be a very Fula joke. That's one that a lot of fulas will make. Those examples I gave are tribal ones, ones based along tribal lines. More often than not, the ones that really make a difference are based on family name, whereas I'm Abdoulaye Jeju. So anybody who is a Sanyang is somebody who I make jokes with and makes jokes with me. 99% of the time it is that one joke. Oh, you're my child. You're my child. Another thing that people will say a lot when they're joke mates is whenever they find out you're of that family, they'll say, oh, that's bad. It's very bad. Your people are bad. I remember getting on a Geli Geli at one point, introducing myself to all the people on the Geli Geli and giving my Gambian name Jeju, and the Fula woman sitting beside me just goes, Jakut! Immediately. As another kind of funny thing about saying jokes is a lot of the time people will just say ridiculous stuff, and I've tried to join in on it, but more than half of the time whenever I say it, they're confused and think that I'm just speaking Jola badly, which I can guarantee you is true. What do you want to say? What do you want to say? Anyway, I think that's enough for this time around. Happy to be filming again. I actually went a full month this time without filming anything because admittedly I felt quite dejected at the prospect of not being able to upload anything and was waiting for Google to get back, but they never did. They just told us repeatedly to wait patiently, so here we are back. And that's someplace it's good to be. In any case, ban again. Toward next time.